Hi and welcome to this quick video. We're going to be having a very quick look at using the custom object editor form that's within the Business Display app and using that with the RTTI, the attributes and also an interface, and how we can go and use that code in a new application very quickly. Okay, so we're going to start here with the actual object editor form, and you'll be able to find this in the BD configuration application. And this form has a number of styles, and those styles refer to different data types. So we have one for date time, one for enumerated types, one for floats and images and integers and strings and so on. Now those types are actually used by the object editor itself when we load up the object. It takes an object of any type and then uses an RTTI context to get hold of the runtime type information. Now, you don't strictly need to create an instance of the RTTI context. You can just go ahead and use the declaration for it, but it is described as good practice to create it and then free it afterwards. Once you've got your runtime context, the next thing that you need to do is to then use the context to get the type, and this will then give you a reference to the class type of the object that's been passed in or that you're using. Now this object class type, for example team my object, then gives us within the types the runtime information about this class type, and we can then go and reference this information to go and do things. So as long as we have got something back from this class type, we can then, for example, get the properties that are listed on this type and then use the current property to then check its name, check its data type, check if it's got attributes against it, and so on. And then we're able to then go ahead and do some additional things like set up the style name based on the current value kind. So if the object has a string or an integer or whatever else it is, we know what type they're going to return back as, and we can go and work with those. So I'm not going to look into the specifics behind this form, but what I want to show is how we can go ahead and use that elsewhere. Now we can see that this form actually, apart from using system RTTI, also uses this object view interface. And this object view interface file, if we control click on that and find declaration, we can see this object view declared here has two methods. Now this refers to an interface, and this interface is a contract that any form can take out. It doesn't have to descend from anything else we have in our application. It's just saying there's a contract here that there's going to be two procedures, one called OV refresh and one called OV cancel. So those any form that uses this interface will have methods that match these procedures. And indeed, if we come, we can see that this form here doesn't use that, but it does have an iObject view, which is passed in on the class method here to edit an object. We can see that's actually passed in here. So let's go and find where this edit object is used within our code. So we can just do Control Shift and find, F for find, search for edit object, and we can see on the viewer here that there's a couple of instances of this being used. So let's go and have a look at one here. Now that's passing in the current form as an instance of the iObject view. So if we scroll up here, we can see that the two methods are actually declared on this form, and the form also declared in its declaration that it supports this interface. So by declaring it, it then needs to have these methods that match the interface contract, and we can then go ahead and use it. So let's have a look at actually going ahead and now and using this in a new project. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a new project, and I need to create a Delphi FireMonkey desktop application. And on the form here, I'm just going to add a button and a memo. Let's just lay those out a little. And to this project, I'm going to add some files that I was creating earlier. So let's just go and find that. So here I've got my unit employee, and this unit employee just has an object on here which has got a enumerated type and some integers and some doubles, just so we can see some different object types being used. And I'm also going to add to this project some additional files from our current demo. So in let's check the client configuration, we should have the object editor form and also the object view interface. So if we just add those two in, and I think we also need to add in one other form that is required, and one other unit, sorry, that's required, and that's in the common, and it's the business display attributes. Now the attributes are used by the object editor to help define information against the objects, and we'll go and have a look at that a little bit later, but I just need to add it in for the moment. Okay, now on my main form here, I'm just going to say that I want to use a unit employee, and I also want to use the object editor form, and here I can just say t form object editor dot edit object. Now I need an instance of an iObject view. So to do that, I need to create this as an iObject view, and we need to just say let's go ahead and use the unit object view interface. In fact, we need to put that declaration in the top part, and we now are able to send in itself, and we now need an object. So if I have a my employee object, and let's just go ahead and create that employee, and I'm going to have to move this declaration up as well. Okay, so on the form now, on the create, let's just set my employee equals t my employee dot create, and let's just on the form destructor through that. Now if we try to compile at this time, we're not going to be able to, because there's an interface here, and we can see we're missing the implementations of this interface. So quite simply, if we press Control Space, we can see it will declare the methods that we're missing for us, and we can just hit Enter on them, and it will then create the method stubs for us. Control Shift C will go ahead and then create those instances. So I'm just going to actually do the same thing here. I'm going to say my employee. Now this has a toString method, and we're just going to set the memo1 dot text to be my employees dot to be my employee to string. Okay, so very simple. Let's go ahead and try and run this now. And if we use the button now, we can actually see up comes the object editor with the properties of the my employee. So we can say this is Stephen Ball, salary is 100, and we can say that's a few, and we can apply and close that, and we can now see that we get all our information to string. If we come back in here, let's change this to sum and apply that, close it, we can now see that that's changed through as well. So very easy to go ahead and edit our object using that object editor and using the interface. Now finally, the object has may have some mapping to a data layer that we want to add in the future. Now on here we've got nothing to define what the maximum size it can use things for are. So if we just go ahead and use the units in here, business display attributes, and we may come in here and say BDA max of 50, and this is going to use and create an attribute of 50. In fact, let's just make it 10 so we can just demo it very quickly and go ahead and run that. What that will allow us to do is I'll just type in here, we can see, oh, I need to just pop that up at the top here. We can see as we type in now that we can't actually type any further because that attribute is active against that control, and the editor forms picked up that attribute to allow us to work and only edit it to that side. So if we jump back to the code, let's just finish off by drilling into have a look at this attribute. Now this attribute here we can see has got a constructor which takes in a value, and it also has an apply to control method against this attribute, which descends from this base class here, which is a tcustom attribute. And the apply to control, which is defined on the base class as a virtual method and then used by the max and the min and the text pair values on here. You can search through the code to have a look at examples of these being used. But there what's used, this apply to control method is picked up from the runtime type information when we look at the class, find the attributes on the methods, and then we're able to, because they are of this base type, call the apply to control method, which will then check the control to find a max or a max length value and set the number into those. So that's how those controls are actually able to edit those or be edited by the object that's passed into them at runtime. Okay, I hope you found that very interesting to see how we're able to work with a number of different technologies together there to bring a real-time object editor out of runtime type information, some attributes, and also how an interface can be useful along the ways too.